The rain pelted against my skin like tiny needles, each drop another sharp reminder of how completely I'd lost control of my life. My thin jacket, soaked through and useless, clung to my trembling body as I limped down the deserted street. The metallic taste of blood lingered in my mouth where Ray had struck me, and my ribs screamed with each labored breath I took. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the darkness for a brief, terrifying moment, and I caught sight of my reflection in a storefront window, bruised cheekbone, split lip, and eyes hollow with defeat. "Just a little farther, Lily," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. "You have to get home to Emma." My 5-year-old daughter was staying with Mrs. Patel next door tonight. I'd dropped her off before going to meet Ray, my ex, who'd promised to finally give me the child support money he owed. Instead, he'd shown up drunk, demanding to see Emma, flying into a rage when I refused. The confrontation had ended with me curled on the ground in the back alley behind the diner, Ray's angry footsteps fading into the distance, and not a dollar to show for the beating I'd taken. Another bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very pavement beneath my feet. The storm was intensifying, and I was still at least 15 blocks from my apartment in the rundown part of Whitecliff. My ankle throbbed where I'd twisted it trying to get away from Ray, and each step sent shards of pain up my leg. I turned down a side street, hoping to find shelter, when my foot caught on an uneven piece of pavement. I went down hard, my hands scraping against the rough concrete as I tried to break my fall. A cry escaped my lips, half pain, half frustration, as I lay there in the rain, too exhausted to immediately get back up. The cold seeped into my bones as rainwater pooled around me. That's when I heard it. The smooth purr of an expensive engine approaching slowly, headlights cut through the sheets of rain, illuminating my pathetic form sprawled on the sidewalk. Fear jolted through me. In this neighborhood, at this hour, nothing good ever came from expensive cars with tinted windows. The black vehicle, some kind of luxury SUV I couldn't identify, pulled alongside the curb. I struggled to my feet, ignoring the screaming pain in my ankle, my heart hammering against my bruised ribs. The back door opened, and I caught a glimpse of a warm leather interior. A man emerged, his silhouette tall and imposing against the storm. "You need help." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, measured, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. Italian, maybe. "I'm fine," I lied, taking a step backward, nearly losing my balance again as my ankle threatened to give way. "Just heading home." He stepped fully into the light cast by a nearby street lamp, and I felt my breath catch. He was dressed in what had to be a custom suit, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, somehow still immaculate despite the downpour. His face was striking, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to glow in the dim light. Young, maybe early 30s, but with an air of authority that made him seem older. "You're bleeding," he observed, his gaze traveling over my face, down to my torn jacket and scraped hands. "And it's nearly midnight in the middle of the worst storm this city has seen in decades." Before I could respond, he shrugged off his suit jacket and stepped toward me, holding it out. I flinched instinctively, a reaction born from years of Ray's unpredictable violence. The stranger froze, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice softer now but still carrying that undeniable note of command. "My name is Dominic Russo." The name sparked something in my memory. Whispered conversations at the diner where I waited tables, hushed warnings about certain parts of the city, certain businesses. Russo. The family that controlled everything in Whitecliff without ever appearing on any official record. "Let me drive you home," he continued, still holding out his jacket. Behind him, I noticed another man standing by the car, muscular and vigilant, eyes scanning the street even through the downpour. "I don't get in cars with strangers," I said, trying to sound firm despite my chattering teeth. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wise policy. But you're hurt. It's late and this isn't a safe area." He glanced up at the sky as thunder boomed overhead. "Consider it a courtesy, nothing more." I hesitated, weighing my options. Home was still so far, the rain showing no signs of letting up, and my body was reaching its limit. What choice did I really have? "I'm Abigail," I said finally, taking a tentative step forward. "Abigail Chen." He draped the jacket over my shoulders, and I was immediately enveloped in warmth and the scent of expensive cologne, something woodsy with notes of amber and spice. His fingers brushed against my collarbone as he adjusted the jacket, sending an unexpected shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "You live in East Whitecliff?" he asked, guiding me toward the car with a hand hovering near the small of my back, careful not to actually touch me. I nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Just a guess," he replied, but something in his tone suggested otherwise. The bodyguard opened the door wider as we approached, his expression unreadable as he assessed me with a professional detachment that made me feel like I was being X-rayed. The interior of the SUV was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Buttery, soft leather seats, warm air that smelled faintly of sandalwood, and a blessed silence as the door closed, sealing out the chaos of the storm. Dominic slid in beside me, maintaining a respectful distance, yet somehow his presence filled the entire space. Up close, I could see faint scars on his knuckles, and a thin white line that ran along his jaw, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. Marks of violence that contradicted the refined elegance of his appearance. "Marco," he addressed the driver, who I hadn't even noticed until now. "East Whitecliff. Ms. Chen will direct you." His gaze returned to me, intense and evaluating. "Who did this to you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "I fell." I lied automatically, the same excuse I'd given my coworkers, my neighbors, myself, too many times to count. Dominic's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "The pavement gave you that bruise on your cheekbone? In the exact shape of a knuckle?" I looked away, focusing on the raindrops racing down the window. "It's not your concern. You made it my concern when you got into my car," he replied, his voice level but with an undercurrent of something dangerous. "Was it your husband?" "Ex," I corrected before I could stop myself. "And he's not... It's complicated. He's my daughter's father." Dominic's eyes never left my face. "You have a child?" I nodded, suddenly protective. "Emma. She's 5. Where is she tonight?" "With a neighbor." I shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "Look, I appreciate the ride, but my personal life isn't..." "Does he know where you live?" Dominic interrupted, his tone making it clear he expected an answer. I swallowed hard. "Yes." The car turned onto Columbia Avenue, entering the Eastern District with its crumbling apartment buildings and shuttered storefronts. I directed Marco to my street, anxiety building in my chest at the thought of this man, this stranger who was clearly someone important, someone dangerous, knowing where Emma and I lived. When we pulled up in front of my building, with its graffiti-covered entrance and broken security door, I saw Dominic take it in with a single sweeping glance. Judgment? Pity? I couldn't tell, and I didn't want to know. "Thank you for the ride," I said, reaching for the door handle. "I can manage from here." "Wait." His hand moved to his inside pocket, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might pull out a gun. Instead, he withdrew a sleek business card, unmarked except for a phone number embossed in silver. "If he comes back, call this number, anytime, day or night." I stared at the card, confused. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Dominic's eyes met mine, and something in them made my heart stutter. "Let's just say I have a particular dislike for men who hurt women and children." I took the card, my fingers brushing against his. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between us, and I quickly pulled away, clutching his jacket tighter around my shoulders. "Your jacket..." "Keep it," he nodded toward my building. "Go inside, Abigail. Get some rest." As I stepped out into the rain, the bodyguard materialized beside me with an umbrella, escorting me to the building's entrance. Before I could protest, Dominic called out from the car, his voice carrying over the storm. "And, Abigail, if he touches you again, I'll know." The words followed me as I made my way up to my third-floor apartment, my mind reeling from the encounter. I checked on Mrs. Patel's door, seeing the lights were out. Emma would be asleep by now. I'd see her in the morning. I unlocked my door, stepping into our small, tidy apartment that suddenly felt different somehow, as if the presence of Dominic Russo had followed me home, changing the very air I breathed. I hung his jacket carefully on the back of a chair, noticing for the first time how the pockets seemed unusually weighted. Cautiously, I reached inside and pulled out a thick envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it to find more cash than I'd ever seen in my life, along with a note written in elegant script. For Emma. No strings attached. I sank to the floor, the envelope clutched to my chest, tears mixing with rainwater on my face. I didn't understand what had just happened or why this stranger had chosen to help me. But as lightning flashed outside my window, illuminating the room in stark white light, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just changed irrevocably, and that Dominic Russo wasn't going to simply disappear from it. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, my dreams haunted by blue eyes and whispered promises. I woke with the sun streaming through my threadbare curtains, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous night came rushing back. The envelope of cash still sat on my nightstand, where I'd placed it after counting its contents 3 times in disbelief. $15,000. More money than I made in a year at the diner. My body ached as I pushed myself up from the bed, each bruise and scrape a painful reminder of Ray's anger, but also of the strange encounter that followed. I padded to the bathroom, wincing at my reflection. The bruise on my cheekbone had darkened to a deep purple, my split lip was swollen, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. I looked like a woman who'd been through war. The sound of a key turning in the lock sent a jolt of panic through me until I remembered. Mrs. Patel bringing Emma home. I quickly splashed cold water on my face and pulled my hair forward to partially hide the bruising. "Mommy!" Emma's voice rang through our small apartment, followed by the patter of her little feet. She burst into the bathroom, her dark pigtails bouncing, her smile wide until she saw my face. Her expression fell instantly. "You got an OE." I knelt down, forcing a smile despite the pain it caused my split lip. "It's nothing, sweetie. Mommy just had a little accident." The familiar lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Emma reached out, her small fingers hovering near my cheek with a gentleness that broke my heart. At 5 years old, she'd already learned to be careful around my accidents. "Mrs. Patel made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse," she said after a moment, her concern giving way to childhood excitement. "And she let me watch cartoons after dinner." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "That sounds wonderful. Did you thank her?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I said thank you and gave her a big hug. She said I'm the best hugger in Whitecliff." Mrs. Patel appeared in the doorway, her kind eyes taking in my appearance with a mixture of concern and something that looked like resignation. At 67, she'd seen enough of life to recognize the signs. "Emma, why don't you go pick out your clothes for today?" I suggested, and she skipped off to her tiny bedroom, already chattering about which of her 3 dresses she might choose. "It's getting worse," Mrs. Patel said quietly once Emma was out of earshot. "This man, he will not stop until—" "I'm handling it," I interrupted, not wanting to hear the end of that sentence. "And I'm going to pay you back for all the times you've watched Emma, Mrs. Patel. I promise." She waved away my words. "I do not want your money, child. I want you and little Emma to be safe." Her gaze drifted to the living room, where Dominic's expensive jacket still hung on the chair, standing out like a diamond in a coal mine against our worn furniture. "Something has changed?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain my encounter with Dominic Russo. "Someone helped me last night, a stranger." Mrs. Patel's eyes widened slightly. "In this city, strangers do not help without wanting something in return." Her words echoed my own doubts. What did Dominic Russo want from me? Men like him didn't hand out thousands of dollars from the goodness of their hearts. There would be a price. There always was. After Mrs. Patel left, Emma and I spent the morning together, making our weekly trip to the small park 3 blocks from our apartment. It was Saturday, my one day off from the diner, and I tried to make it special for Emma despite our limited means. She chattered excitedly as we walked, her small hand in mine, her world still full of wonder and possibility. The park was busier than usual, the aftermath of the storm drawing families out to enjoy the clear sky and fresh air. Emma ran to the swings, her favorite, and I lowered myself carefully onto a nearby bench, trying not to wince as my bruised ribs protested. "Higher, Mommy, higher," she called, her face alight with joy as she pumped her legs just as I'd taught her. I was so focused on Emma that I didn't immediately notice the black SUV parked across the street, or the man leaning against it watching us. When I finally did, a chill ran through me despite the warm morning sun. Not Dominic, but the bodyguard from last night, Marco, if I remembered correctly. Our eyes met across the distance, and he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement before returning his attention to his phone. They were watching me. Why? I called Emma down from the swings, suddenly feeling exposed. Let's go get ice cream, sweetie. Her eyes lit up at the rare treat. Really? Can I have sprinkles? Of course, I promised, taking her hand and leading her away from the park, my heart racing as I resisted the urge to look back at the SUV. The small ice cream shop on the corner was cool and quiet, a brief respite from my growing paranoia. As Emma happily devoured her strawberry cone with rainbow sprinkles, I tried to organize my thoughts. I should call the police about Ray, file another restraining order that he would inevitably ignore. I should return Dominic's money. Keeping it felt dangerous, like accepting a deal whose terms I didn't understand. I should pack our bags and leave Whitecliff altogether, start fresh somewhere Ray couldn't find us. But where would we go? How would we survive? The practical concerns that had kept me trapped for so long reasserted themselves, crushing my momentary fantasies of escape. Mommy, look, a butterfly. Emma pointed out the window, her ice cream momentarily forgotten. I turned to follow her gaze and froze. Across the street, Ray was stumbling out of a bar, his movements unsteady even at this early hour. My blood turned to ice as he looked around, his gaze sweeping the street like a predator searching for prey. We need to go, baby, I said, wiping Emma's hands and face with a napkin. Right now, but I'm not finished. I'll get you another one tomorrow, I promised, helping her down from the stool and heading toward the back exit, praying Ray hadn't spotted us. We slipped out into the alley behind the shop, and I quickened our pace, holding Emma's hand tightly as we navigated the narrow passage. Why are we going this way? Emma asked, struggling to keep up with my longer strides. It's a shortcut, I lied, my eyes darting around for the quickest route home. If I could just get us back to the apartment, lock the doors. Abby! Ray's voice echoed down the alley behind us, slurred but unmistakable. I didn't turn around, just scooped Emma into my arms despite the screaming protest from my ribs, and moved as fast as my injured ankle would allow. Mommy! Who's that man? Emma's voice trembled as she looked over my shoulder. No one, baby. Just hold on to me. I turned a corner, hoping to lose him in the maze of back streets, but Ray knew this neighborhood as well as I did. His footsteps grew louder, faster, as he gained on us. You think you can hide my daughter from me? He shouted. After everything I've done for you? Emma buried her face in my neck, her small body trembling. I'm scared, Mommy. It's okay, I whispered, though we both knew it wasn't. I turned another corner and found myself facing a chain-link fence too high to climb, especially with Emma in my arms. I set her down, pushing her behind me as I turned to face Ray. He appeared at the mouth of the alley, his face flushed with alcohol and anger, his eyes bloodshot. He'd once been handsome. That was what had drawn me to him 5 years ago, before I understood the violence that lurked beneath the surface charm. There's my girl, he said, his gaze fixed on Emma, ignoring me completely. Come give your daddy a hug. Emma pressed herself against my legs, shaking her head silently. She doesn't want to see you, Ray, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You're drunk. Again. His expression darkened. Don't tell me what my daughter wants. He took a step closer. You've been poisoning her against me, haven't you? Filling her head with lies? The only poison here is you, I replied, anger momentarily overcoming my fear. Leave us alone. I've filed for full custody, and after last night, no judge is going to let you near her. Ray laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off the brick walls surrounding us. You think anyone's going to believe you? A waitress who can barely make rent? He took another step forward. You're nothing without me, Abby. Nothing. I backed up until I felt the fence pressing against my spine, Emma still hidden behind me. I'm calling the police, I bluffed, reaching for my pocket as if I had a phone. No, you're not. Ray lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my wrist with bruising force. You're coming home with me. Both of you. Emma let out a frightened cry that cut through me like a knife. I twisted in Ray's grip, trying to break free. "Run, Emma!" I shouted. "Go find Mrs. Patel!" But Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as Ray's grip tightened painfully on my arm. I saw his other hand ball into a fist, and I braced myself for the blow I knew was coming. It never landed. The sound of tires screeching at the alley entrance made us all turn. The black SUV had pulled up, blocking the exit. The driver's door opened, and Marco stepped out, his expression grim as he assessed the situation. Ray's grip on my wrist loosened slightly. "Who the hell are you?" Marco didn't answer, just opened the rear door. Dominic emerged, his presence immediately commanding the space. Today he wore a light gray suit that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the alley, a stark contrast to the grime surrounding us. His eyes took in the scene in an instant. My terrified stance, Emma cowering behind me, Ray's aggressive posture. "Mr. Chen," he said, his voice pleasant, yet somehow chilling. "I believe you're trespassing." Ray's face contorted with confusion and anger. "Who the fuck do you think you are? This is between me and my family." Dominic walked toward us with unhurried confidence, each step measured and deliberate. "Your family?" He glanced at me, then at Emma, his expression softening almost imperceptibly when he saw her tear-streaked face. "They don't appear to share that sentiment." Ray released my wrist, turning to face Dominic fully. I immediately pulled Emma into my arms, pressing her face against my shoulder so she wouldn't see what might happen next. "This isn't your business, Suit," Ray spat. "Walk away now, and I won't have to mess up that pretty face of yours." A smile touched Dominic's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Interesting threat. He glanced at Marco, who remained by the car, alert, but making no move to intervene. "Your concern for my appearance is touching, but misplaced." Ray, never one to back down when drunk, lunged at Dominic with a wild swing. What happened next was so fast I could barely process it. Dominic sidestepped with graceful efficiency, caught Ray's arm, and in one fluid motion had him pinned against the brick wall, arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made Ray howl in pain. "Now, let me be very clear," Dominic said, his mouth close to Ray's ear, voice low, but carrying in the quiet alley. "Abigail and Emma are under my protection. If you approach them again, if you so much as look in their direction, what happens next won't be a conversation. Do you understand?" Ray struggled uselessly against Dominic's hold. "You can't do this. I have rights." "Rights?" Dominic tightened his grip, making Ray gasp. "Let's talk about rights. You lost any rights when you raised your hand to the mother of your child, when you terrified a 5-year-old girl who should be looking at you with love, not fear." He leaned closer, saying something else I couldn't hear, but whatever it was made all the color drain from Ray's face. When Dominic released him, Ray stumbled away, casting one hateful glance back at me before hurrying down the alley, disappearing around the corner without another word. Dominic straightened his cuffs, his composure perfect despite the brief violence. He turned to us, his expression softening as he approached. Emma peeked out from my shoulder, studying him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked me quietly. I shook my head, too stunned by what had just happened to form words. Dominic knelt down to Emma's eye level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hello, Emma." "My name is Dominic. I'm a friend of your mother's." Emma regarded him solemnly. "Did you make the bad man go away?" A genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his features. "Yes, I did. And he won't be bothering you or your mother again." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "He made Mommy cry." Something dark flashed in Dominic's eyes before he carefully controlled his expression. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Strong, brave mothers like yours should never cry." He stood, returning his attention to me. "My car is waiting. Let me take you both home." I hesitated, acutely aware of Emma in my arms, of the line I would be crossing by accepting more help from this man. "Why are you doing this? Why were you even here?" Dominic's gaze was steady, unreadable. "Let's just say I like to ensure my investments are protected." "Investment? Is that what I am to you?" I felt a flicker of indignation through my fear and confusion. His expression softened. Poor choice of words. I apologize. He gestured toward the waiting SUV. Please, Abigail, let me help you. Both of you. With Ray's threat still ringing in my ears, and Emma's safety my only priority, I made my decision. I nodded and followed Dominic to the car, stepping into a world I didn't understand, with a man whose power and intentions remained a mystery to me. But as Emma settled against me in the luxurious back seat, her small body finally relaxing as we pulled away, one thing became crystal clear. For better or worse, Dominic Russo had just become entangled in our lives. And I wasn't entirely sure I wanted him to leave. The days that followed passed in a strange haze of normalcy and underlying tension. I returned to work at Maggie's Diner, serving greasy breakfast specials to truckers and night shift workers with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The bruises on my face faded from angry purple to sickly yellow, drawing fewer stares from customers, but no less concern from Maggie herself. "You know you can talk to me if you're in trouble, honey," she said one afternoon, as I refilled salt shakers in the quiet lull between lunch and dinner. Maggie was in her 60s, tough as nails from decades of running the diner in one of Whitecliff's roughest neighborhoods. She'd given me a job when no one else would, never asking questions about my past or the occasional bruises. "I'm fine," I assured her, the lie coming easily after years of practice. "Just clumsy." Maggie's lips pressed into a thin line of disbelief. "And I'm the Queen of England." She wiped her hands on her apron, leaning against the counter. "You know, it's funny. Ray hasn't been hanging around the parking lot waiting for you these past few days. Used to be he was out there like clockwork, especially when you worked late." I kept my eyes on the salt shakers, trying to hide my surprise. I hadn't seen Ray since the encounter in the alley a week ago, but I'd been too afraid to hope his absence was permanent. Maybe he finally got the message. Maybe. Maggie studied me with shrewd eyes. Or maybe it has something to do with that fancy black car that's been parked across the street during your shifts. My head snapped up. "What car?" Maggie jerked her chin toward the window. "That one. Been there every day this week. Different driver sometimes, but always the same car." I moved to the window, my heart racing as I peered through the Venetian blinds. Sure enough, the now familiar black SUV sat across the street, Marco visible behind the wheel. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, pretending he hadn't been watching the diner. "Friend of yours?" Maggie asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Not exactly," I murmured, letting the blinds fall back into place. Maggie placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Listen, Abby, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but you be careful. In this city, help never comes without strings attached." I nodded, unable to explain that I'd been thinking the exact same thing ever since the night Dominic had found me in the rain. The money he'd given me remained untouched, hidden in the back of my closet. I'd thought about using it to move Emma and me far away from Whitecliff. But something held me back, a nagging feeling that accepting Dominic's money meant accepting his presence in our lives, whatever that might entail. Yet I couldn't deny the change his intervention had brought. For the first time in years, I walked to and from work without constantly looking over my shoulder. Emma slept through the night without nightmares, and I found myself wondering more and more about the man who had swept into our lives like a storm, rearranging everything in his wake. The bell over the diner door jingled, pulling me from my thoughts. A woman entered, tall, immaculately dressed in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and large designer sunglasses concealed her eyes despite the overcast day outside. She surveyed the nearly empty diner before her gaze settled on me. Something about her posture, her confident stride as she approached, reminded me of Dominic. "Abigail Chen?" she asked, her voice carrying the same subtle accent as his. I nodded cautiously. "Can I help you?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing sharp, intelligent eyes that assessed me with cool efficiency. "I'm Sophia Russo. Dominic is my brother." She extended a manicured hand, which I shook hesitantly. "I'd like to speak with you, privately." Maggie raised an eyebrow from behind the counter but said nothing. I untied my apron, hanging it on a hook. I'm due for a break anyway. Sophia led me outside, nodding briefly to Marco in the SUV before guiding me to a small coffee shop 2 doors down from the diner. We settled at a table in the corner, away from the few other patrons. She ordered an espresso in flawless Italian while I asked for simple black coffee, feeling increasingly out of place. "My brother has taken an unusual interest in you and your daughter," she said once our drinks arrived, getting straight to the point. I wanted to see for myself what all the fuss was about. Heat rose to my cheeks. "There's no fuss. Your brother helped me when I was in trouble. That's all." Sophia's lips curved in a skeptical smile. "Dominic doesn't just help random women he finds on the street. He calculated every move he makes." She took a sip of her espresso, studying me over the rim of the tiny cup. "Do you know who we are, Abigail?" I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "I know enough." "Do you?" She set down her cup with a delicate clink. "Our family has certain businesses in Whitecliff. Dominic oversees those businesses now that our father has retired. People don't cross him. They don't say no to him. And they certainly don't refuse his gifts." The money in my closet suddenly felt like it was burning through the floorboards of my apartment. "I never asked for his help or his money. And yet you have both." Sophia's gaze was penetrating. "Has he told you why?" I shook my head. "My brother lost someone once," she said after a moment, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "A woman and her child. He couldn't protect them. I think perhaps he sees in you a chance to rewrite that history." Something cold settled in the pit of my stomach. "I'm not a charity case or a redemption arc for your brother." "No," Sophia agreed, surprising me. "You're not. And that's precisely what worries me." She leaned forward. "Dominic is not a man who forms attachments easily, Abigail. When he does, he becomes possessive, protective to a fault. The men who guard you day and night, that's just the beginning. He will weave himself into every aspect of your life until you can't remember what it was like before him." I swallowed hard, thinking of the SUV that followed me everywhere, the way Ray had vanished from my life as if he'd never existed. "What exactly are you saying?" Sophia sat back, her expression unreadable. "I'm saying that my brother is a dangerous man to love, and an even more dangerous man to reject." I'm not," I stammered, caught off guard by her implication. "Not yet," she said with certainty. "But I've seen how he speaks of you, how he arranged his schedule to be in that alley when your ex-husband found you." She raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Did you think that was coincidence?" My coffee turned bitter in my mouth as realization dawned. "He's been watching me all along." "Of course he has." Sophia's tone suggested this should have been obvious. Dominic leaves nothing to chance. The small coffee shop suddenly felt suffocating. "Why are you telling me this? Are you warning me to stay away from him?" A slight smile touched Sophia's lips. "On the contrary, I'm simply preparing you for what's coming." She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. "Dominic would like you and Emma to join him for dinner tonight. This contains the address and other arrangements." I made no move to take the envelope. "And if I say no, you won't." She stood, placing money on the table for both our drinks. "Wear the dress. It's your color." With that cryptic remark, she replaced her sunglasses and walked out, leaving me staring at the envelope as if it might bite. Curiosity eventually won out. Inside, I found an address in the Heights, Whitecliff's most exclusive neighborhood, along with a credit card in my name and a note instructing me to visit an upscale boutique downtown at 3 p.m. A car would be waiting outside the diner to take me there. I returned to work in a daze, the encounter with Sophia replaying in my mind. Her words about Dominic's possessiveness should have frightened me, yet I found myself more intrigued than alarmed. Who was he really? What had happened in his past, and why had he chosen to insert himself into my life so completely? By the time my shift ended, I'd made my decision. I called Mrs. Patel, who agreed to watch Emma for the evening, though her expression grew concerned when I mentioned I'd be going out. "Be careful, child," she warned, echoing Maggie's earlier sentiment. "Men like that, they see something they want. They take it, no matter the cost." I assured her I would be fine, though doubt gnawed at me as I made my way to the black SUV waiting outside. Marco held the door open without a word, his expression as impassive as ever, as he drove me to an elegant boutique in downtown Whitecliff, a place I'd passed countless times, but never dared enter. Inside, I was greeted by a saleswoman whose professional smile faltered only slightly at my diner uniform and scuffed shoes. "Ms. Chen, we've been expecting you. Mr. Russo has already selected several options for your approval." What followed was a surreal hour of trying on dresses that cost more than 6 months of my rent, being fussed over by attendants who adjusted hemlines and offered jewelry to complement each outfit. I felt like an imposter in this world of luxury and excess, yet couldn't deny the flutter of excitement as I turned before the mirror in a deep emerald silk dress that seemed to transform me into someone else entirely, someone confident and beautiful, with no trace of the exhausted, frightened waitress I saw every day. "This one," I said finally, running my hands over the smooth fabric. "This is the one." The saleswoman's smile widened with genuine approval. "An excellent choice, Mr. Russo thought you might prefer this one. He has quite an eye." The idea that Dominic had personally selected these dresses, that he had imagined me in this particular one, sent a strange thrill through me that I tried desperately to ignore. This wasn't a fairy tale, and Dominic Russo was no Prince Charming. He was something far more complex and potentially dangerous. Yet when I emerged from the boutique in my new dress, hair styled in loose waves, subtle makeup enhancing features I'd long neglected, I felt a power I hadn't experienced in years. Marco actually did a double take before opening the car door, his usual stoic expression briefly giving way to surprise. The drive to the Heights took us through parts of Whitecliff I rarely saw. Pristine streets lined with ancient trees, mansions set back behind wrought iron gates, a world apart from the struggling neighborhood where Emma and I fought to survive. We finally pulled up to a modernist structure of glass and stone perched on the edge of the cliffs that gave the city its name, overlooking the churning ocean below. The house seemed to defy gravity, cantilevered out over the water with breathtaking audacity. Marco led me to the door, which opened before we reached it. A middle-aged woman in a simple black dress greeted us with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Ms. Chen, welcome. I'm Mrs. Ricci, the housekeeper. Mr. Russo is waiting for you on the terrace." She led me through the house, a minimalist showcase of museum-quality art and custom furniture, all in muted tones that directed attention to the spectacular ocean views visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. We finally emerged onto a vast terrace where Dominic stood at the glass railing, his back to us as he gazed out at the sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Sir," Mrs. Ricci announced quietly, "Ms. Chen has arrived." Dominic turned, and the intensity of his gaze as it traveled over me made my breath catch. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar, casual, yet elegant. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, the air between us charged with something I couldn't name. "Thank you, Anna," he said finally, his eyes never leaving mine. "Please serve dinner in 30 minutes. Mrs. Ricci nodded and disappeared back into the house, leaving us alone on the terrace with only the sound of waves crashing below. "You look beautiful," Dominic said, approaching with measured steps. "Emerald suits you." "Your sister said the same thing," I replied, finding my voice. "She paid me a visit today." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Did she?" Sophia tends to take preventative measures when she's concerned. "Concerned about what?" "Me." He gestured to a seating area where a bottle of wine was already breathing beside 2 glasses. "Please sit. Would you like a drink?" I sat on the edge of an absurdly comfortable lounge chair, watching as he poured deep red wine into delicate crystal glasses. "Your sister seems to think I should be afraid of you." Dominic handed me a glass, his fingers briefly brushing against mine. "And are you?" The honest answer surprised even me. "No, I should be, but I'm not." He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face, softening the hard lines of power and control. "Good. Fear is a poor foundation for anything worthwhile. Is that what this is?" I asked, gesturing between us. "Something worthwhile?" Dominic took the seat opposite me, his movements fluid and precise. I believe it could be. He took a sip of his wine, studying me. You haven't touched the money I gave you. It wasn't a question. How do you know that? I know many things about you, Abigail. I know you work 60 hours a week at a diner that pays you less than you deserve. I know you've applied for 3 different programs at Whitecliff Community College but can't afford the tuition. I know Emma's favorite ice cream is strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, and that she wants to be an astronaut when she grows up. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm evening air. You've been watching us. Protecting you, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I set my wine glass down, untouched. Your sister told me about the woman you couldn't save. Is that what I am to you? A second chance? Dominic's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Sophia talks too much, or maybe not enough. I leaned forward. Why me, Dominic? Why did you stop that night in the rain? Why are you doing all of this? For a long moment, he was silent, his gaze drifting to the darkening horizon where stars were beginning to appear. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, tinged with something that might have been vulnerability. 5 years ago, my cousin Maria left her husband, a violent man with connections to a rival family. She came to me for protection, bringing her 3-year-old son. I provided an apartment, security, everything she needed. His jaw tightened. It wasn't enough. Her husband found them. By the time I arrived, it was too late. The grief in his voice was raw, genuine. I found myself reaching out, placing my hand over his without thinking. I'm sorry. His eyes met mine, surprise flickering in their depths at the contact. When I saw you that night, bleeding and broken in the rain, something in me wouldn't drive past. His hand turned beneath mine, our fingers intertwining. It wasn't just about Maria, it was about you, your strength, your dignity. Even in that moment, I recognized something in you that called to me. My heart pounded in my chest, his words stirring emotions I'd buried years ago. And now? Now, he said, his voice dropping lower. I find myself unable to stay away, unwilling to try. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. I want to give you and Emma the life you deserve, Abigail. Safety, opportunity, everything you've been denied. And what do you want in return? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since the night he found me. Dominic's gaze intensified. Your trust. For now, that's all I ask. Before I could respond, Mrs. Ricci appeared at the terrace door. Dinner is served, sir. Dominic stood, still holding my hand, and helped me to my feet. Shall we? As he led me inside to a dining room where candles flickered on a table set for 2, I knew I was crossing a threshold. Stepping willingly into Dominic Russo's world with all its luxury, danger, and unanswered questions. Part of me screamed that this was madness, that men like him didn't simply rescue women like me without ulterior motives. Yet another part, a part that had been silent for too long, whispered that perhaps this was exactly what I needed. Not just a protector, but someone who saw value in me beyond my role as Emma's mother or Ray's former punching bag. Someone who looked at me the way Dominic did now, as if I were precious and desirable and worth fighting for. As we sat down to dinner, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the windows, I made my decision. I would trust him, cautiously, gradually, and see where this unexpected path might lead. For tonight, at least, I would allow myself to feel beautiful and desired, to imagine a life where Emma and I were safe, where possibilities stretched before us like the star-filled sky above Dominic's house on the cliff. What I didn't yet understand was just how completely that decision would transform my life, and how dangerous Dominic Russo could truly be, not to me, but to anyone who threatened what he had claimed as his. Life has a way of shifting beneath your feet when you least expect it. One moment, you're a struggling single mother counting pennies for rent. The next, you're navigating a relationship with a man whose world operates by entirely different rules. In the weeks that followed that dinner on the cliff, Dominic became a steady presence in our lives, never imposing, always attentive. He never stayed overnight, maintaining a respectful distance that both frustrated and relieved me. Our relationship existed in a strange limbo, intimate conversations and lingering touches that never quite crossed the final boundary. I sensed he was letting me set the pace, waiting for me to decide when I was ready for more. Emma, with a child's simple wisdom, accepted him without question. "Mr. Dom," she called him, her face lighting up whenever he appeared. He brought her educational toys and books rather than the extravagant gifts I feared, and spent hours patiently answering her endless questions about the world. I watched from the kitchen one evening as he helped her build a model of the solar system, his hands I knew could be deadly, gently guiding hers as they placed tiny planets in their orbits. "Jupiter's the biggest," Emma informed him seriously, "but Saturn has the prettiest rings." "That's right," Dominic agreed, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "And do you know which planet is the hottest? It's not the closest to the sun." Emma's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Venus?" His smile was genuine, proud. "Exactly right. You're very smart, Piccola Stella." "What does that mean?" she asked, looking up at him with curious eyes. "Little star," he translated, carefully hanging the completed model from the ceiling. "Because you shine so brightly." Something warm unfurled in my chest as I watched them, a feeling I was afraid to name. This dangerous man with his empire built on violence and fear was somehow gentle, patient, even tender with my daughter. It was a side of him I suspected few ever saw. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep surrounded by her new books about space, Dominic and I sat on my small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine he'd brought. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly, "just like her mother." I smiled, looking through the glass door at Emma's peaceful form. "She deserves so much more than I've been able to give her." "You've given her everything important," Dominic replied, his hand covering mine on the railing. "Security, love, strength. Material things are easy to provide. Character isn't." I turned to study his profile in the dim light. "You're not what I expected," his lips curved in amusement. "And what did you expect? Someone colder, more calculating." "Oh, I'm calculating," he admitted without shame. "Every move I make has purpose. But cold?" He shook his head. "Our family isn't built on coldness, Abigail. It's built on passion. For power, for vengeance, for protection, for those we consider our own." The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver through me. "And what am I to you, Dominic? Am I your own?" His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. "I think you know the answer to that." He left soon after, kissing me chastely at the door, leaving me frustrated and confused by the contradictions he embodied. I was falling for a man whose full reality I still didn't understand. A man who could discuss astronomy with a 5-year-old one moment and order violence the next. The protective bubble Dominic had created around Emma and me felt secure, but increasingly restrictive. Marco or another guard was always nearby, following discreetly when I went to work or took Emma to school. Dominic had offered repeatedly to move us to a better apartment, even to a house in a safer neighborhood. But I'd refused, clinging to this last shred of independence. I'd accepted smaller gifts, Emma's educational toys, new winter coats for both of us, a laptop so I could finally enroll in online courses at the community college. But moving into a home he provided felt too much like surrender, like acknowledging that my life and my daughter's were now completely entwined with his. One afternoon, about 2 months after that rainy night when Dominic had found me, I was working the late shift at the diner when Maggie approached, her expression troubled. "There's someone asking for you," she said, nodding toward a booth in the corner. "Says he's your cousin." I frowned, setting down the coffee pot. "I don't have a cousin." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "That's what I thought. Want me to call your friend with the fancy car outside?" I glanced through the window, seeing Marco in his usual spot across the street. "No, I'll handle it." Taking a deep breath, I approached the booth. The man sitting there was in his early 30s, thin and wiry with sharp, assessing eyes. He didn't look familiar, but something in his demeanor, the way he scanned the exits, how his hand stayed close to his jacket, reminded me of Dominic's men. "Can I help you?" I asked, staying at a safe distance. He smiled thinly. "Abigail Chen? My name is Vincent. I work for Alessandro Conti." When I didn't react, his smile widened. I see Russo hasn't shared much about the business landscape of our city. I'm working, I said flatly. What do you want? Vincent leaned forward. Mr. Conti would like to speak with you. He has a proposition that might interest you, one that involves your daughter's future. Ice flooded my veins at the mention of Emma. I don't know who you or Mr. Conti are, but you need to leave, now. Mr. Conti doesn't appreciate being dismissed, Vincent said, his pleasant tone unchanged but his eyes hardening, especially by a woman who's clearly become Dominic Russo's latest project. Is there a problem here? I turned to find Sophia standing behind me, elegant as always in a tailored black pantsuit, her expression pleasant, but her eyes cold as she assessed Vincent. Vincent's demeanor shifted subtly. Ms. Russo, I wasn't aware you frequented establishments like this. I go wherever my family's interests are threatened, Sophia replied smoothly. She turned to me. Abigail, I believe Emma's school just called, something about her feeling unwell. Why don't you go check on her? I'll keep your friend company. The implied order was clear. I nodded, untying my apron as Vincent's eyes darted between us, calculating. This conversation isn't finished, he called after me as I headed for the door. Oh, I think it is, I heard Sophia reply, before the door closed behind me. Marco was already waiting outside, the car door open. Get in, he said, his usual stoic expression replaced with urgency. We need to move. What's happening? I demanded as we pulled away from the curb. Is Emma really sick? Who is Alessandro Conti? Emma is fine, Marco assured me, checking the rearview mirror frequently as he drove. Ms. Russo created a diversion to get you out safely. As for Conti, he frowned. He's the head of a rival organization. Your involvement with Mr. Russo has attracted his attention. Fear gripped me. I need to get to Emma. Now. Already handled. 2 of our men picked her up from school 10 minutes ago. They're taking her to the safe house. Safe house? My voice rose in panic. What safe house? Where is my daughter? Marco's expression softened slightly. Mr. Russo established emergency protocols weeks ago. Emma is safe, I promise. We're joining them now. The safe house turned out to be a secluded estate nestled in the forested hills north of Whitecliff, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. We passed through multiple checkpoints before reaching the main building, a sprawling contemporary structure of stone and glass that somehow managed to blend into its natural surroundings. As soon as the car stopped, I leapt out, scanning frantically for Emma. The massive front door opened, and she came running out, her face lighting up when she saw me. Mommy, this house has a secret room behind the bookshelf, just like in the movies. I knelt, gathering her into my arms, relief washing over me as I felt her solid, safe presence. Are you okay, baby? Did anything scary happen? Emma shook her head, pulling back to look at me with excitement. Mr. Leo and Mr. Paulo came to school and said we were going on an adventure. They let me ride in the front seat and everything. Over Emma's shoulder, I saw Dominic emerge from the house, his expression tense until his eyes found us. He approached slowly, giving me time to collect myself. She's fine, he said quietly. My men are very good with children. They made it seem like a game. I stood, keeping Emma close. Someone came to the diner. He mentioned Emma. Dominic's jaw tightened. Conti is testing boundaries. It's my fault. I should have anticipated this. Who is he? What does he want with us? Not here, Dominic said, glancing meaningfully at Emma. Let her explore the house with Anna. We'll talk inside. Mrs. Ricci appeared as if summoned, warmly greeting Emma and offering to show her the kitchen where fresh cookies were just coming out of the oven. Emma went willingly, always eager for new adventures, while Dominic led me to a study lined with books and dominated by a massive desk of dark wood. Alessandro Conti controls the harbor district and parts of West Whitecliff, he explained once the door closed behind us. Our families have maintained an uneasy peace for years, each respecting the other's territory and interests. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, handing one to me. Until now. I took a sip, the whiskey burning a path down my throat. What changed? I did. Dominic's eyes met mine, More specifically, my priorities changed when you entered my life. Conti sees you and Emma as leverage, a weakness he can exploit. So we're a liability to you, I said flatly. No. Dominic moved closer, cupping my face in his hands. You're the most valuable thing in my life, which makes you a target. There's a difference. I pulled away, anger rising through my fear. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Emma and I are being hunted because of our connection to you. You were already being hunted, Dominic reminded me, his voice hardening. By a man who hurt you repeatedly, who terrified your daughter. The difference is that now, you have my protection. Your protection? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call being followed everywhere? Having my daughter snatched from school without my knowledge? Being forced to hide in some fortress in the woods? Dominic's expression remained calm, which only fueled my anger. These measures are temporary. Once I've dealt with Conti, dealt with him, I interrupted. Like you dealt with Ray? Is that why I haven't seen him in 2 months? What did you do, Dominic? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I gave him a choice. He chose to leave Whitecliff. The implication hung in the air between us. I sank into a leather chair, suddenly exhausted. I never asked for any of this. I never wanted to be part of your world. And yet here we are. Dominic knelt before me, taking my hands in his. I can't change who I am or what I do, Abigail. I can only promise that you and Emma will always be protected no matter what. I looked into his eyes, searching for something. A hint of the gentle man who had built a solar system with my daughter, who had held me as if I were made of glass. How long do we have to stay here? A few days, a week at most. His thumbs traced circles on my palms, a gesture that had become familiar, comforting. I've brought your things from the apartment. Emma won't miss any school. I've arranged for a tutor, and you won't miss your online classes. The internet connection here is excellent. Of course he had thought of everything. It was both reassuring and disturbing how completely he had integrated himself into our lives, anticipating our needs before we even voiced them. And then what? I asked, the question that had been building since that first night suddenly unavoidable. Where do we go from here, Dominic? What is this between us? He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, placing it on the desk beside us. This isn't how I planned to do this, he said quietly. I had arranged a weekend in Venice, a gondola ride at sunset. All very romantic and far from here. A rueful smile touched his lips. But perhaps this is more honest. I stared at the box, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dominic, I love you, Abigail. The words were simple, direct, delivered with the same certainty he seemed to bring to everything. I love Emma. I want you both in my life permanently, officially. I want to give you my name, my protection, everything I have. You barely know me, I whispered, though we both knew it wasn't true. In 2 months, he had learned more about me than Ray had in 5 years. I know everything that matters. He took my face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know you'd do anything for Emma. I know you pretend to hate the cinnamon rolls at the diner, but secretly eat them on your break. His smile deepened. I know you sing in the shower when you think no one can hear. I know you're afraid of thunderstorms, but never let Emma see it. Tears filled my eyes. Overwhelmed by the depth of his observation, his attention to the details that made up my life. And what about your world? The danger? The violence? It exists, he acknowledged. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise, but it need never touch you or Emma directly. Many in my position have families who live entirely separate from the business. Is that what you want? A wife who pretends not to know what you do? Dominic shook his head. No. I want a partner who understands everything, who chooses me with open eyes. He reached for the box but didn't open it. This isn't a demand or an ultimatum, Abigail. It's an offer, a choice. Take all the time you need. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Ricci poked her head in. I'm sorry to disturb you, but dinner is ready, and the little one is asking for her mother. Dominic stood, offering me his hand. We should join her. We can continue this conversation later. I took his hand, allowing him to lead me to the dining room where Emma waited, chattering excitedly about the house and the deer she'd spotted from the window. Throughout dinner, I caught Dominic watching me, his eyes warm but giving nothing away, applying no pressure as I turned his proposal over in my mind. Later that night, after I'd tucked Emma into bed in a room that seemed designed specifically for her, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and books about space filling the shelves, I wandered through the quiet house, eventually finding my way onto a terrace overlooking the forest. Dominic stood at the railing, his back to me, so reminiscent of that first dinner at his cliff house that my breath caught. "You planned this all along," I said, joining him at the railing. "From the moment you found me in the rain." He turned, moonlight casting shadows across his face. "Not all of it. I didn't plan to fall in love with you, or with Emma, but you planned to bring us into your life, to make us yours." "Yes." His honesty was refreshing, if unsettling. "I saw something in you that night, a fierceness, a will to survive against all odds. It called to something in me." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm a possessive man, Abigail. I see something I want, and I pursue it relentlessly, but I've never wanted someone to choose me the way I want you to choose me." I leaned into his touch, my decision crystallizing in that moment of honesty. "If I say yes, there are conditions." A smile touched his lips. "Name them." "Emma comes first, always. Her safety, her happiness, her future, without question," he agreed. "I finish my degree. I work if I want to. I'm not a trophy or a possession." I would expect nothing less. I took a deep breath. The final condition, the most important. "And I need to know everything, Dominic. No secrets about your business, your enemies, your past. If I'm going to be your wife, I need to understand exactly what that means." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, respect, and perhaps a hint of concern. "The more you know, the more complicated your position becomes." "I'm already in the middle of a war I didn't start," I pointed out. "At least let me understand the battlefield." Dominic was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally he nodded. "Complete transparency. You'll know everything I know, but understand what you're asking, Abigail. Once you cross that line, there's no going back." I stepped closer, erasing the careful distance he always maintained between us. "I crossed that line the moment I got into your car that night. I just didn't know it yet." His arms encircled my waist, drawing me against him. "Is that a yes, then?" In answer, I reached up, threading my fingers through his hair, and pulled his mouth down to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, before deepening into something urgent and consuming. All the tension, the careful restraint of the past 2 months, dissolved in a rush of heat and need. His hands tightened on my waist, lifting me effortlessly onto the railing as my legs wrapped around him, pulling him closer. "Wait," he murmured against my mouth. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew the velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that caught the moonlight. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and understated despite its obvious value. "Ask me again, properly." I laughed softly, taking the ring from the box. "Dominic Russo, will you marry me?" His smile was radiant, transforming his face into something almost boyish. "Yes, Abigail Chen, I will marry you." He slid the ring onto my finger, then sealed the promise with a kiss that felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. In that moment, I knew I was binding my fate to his, for better or worse. Emma and I were entering a world of luxury and danger, protection and risk, a world where Dominic Russo's love would be our greatest strength and potentially our greatest vulnerability. As he lifted me into his arms, carrying me toward the master suite, I pushed away the lingering doubts, the voices of Maggie and Mrs. Patel, warning me about men who took what they wanted. Tonight, I would allow myself this happiness, this passion. Tomorrow would bring complications enough. What I didn't realize was that tomorrow would arrive sooner than expected, bringing with it a threat that would test not only Dominic's power, but the very foundation of the choice I had just made. Word count, 2,200 tentar novament. Malk, thank you for your approval. I'll now create the 5th and final block of the story, providing resolution for the characters as requested. Block 5, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the weight of Dominic's arm draped protectively across my waist. For a moment, I simply lay there, watching the rise and fall of his chest, studying the scars that marked his body, testaments to a violent life I was now choosing to share. In sleep, the hard edges of power and control softened, revealing the man beneath the carefully constructed facade. The sapphire on my finger caught the morning light, sending blue reflections dancing across the ceiling. It felt both foreign and right. This tangible symbol of a commitment I'd made with eyes wide open. Whatever came next, I had entered into it willingly, fully aware of who Dominic was and the world he inhabited. As if sensing my gaze, he stirred, eyes opening to fix immediately on mine. A smile curved his lips as he reached out to trace my cheek. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. I covered his hand with mine. "None." His phone vibrated on the nightstand, breaking the moment. Dominic's expression shifted instantly from tender lover to focused leader as he checked the screen. "Marco, it must be important for him to call this early." I watched as he answered, his body tensing as he listened. "When?" he asked, already rising from the bed, reaching for his clothes. "And you're certain?" Another pause. "Keep them there. I'm coming down." "What is it?" I asked, pulling the sheet around me as I sat up. Dominic's eyes met mine, and I saw the conflict there, the promise of honesty warring with the instinct to protect me from his world. 2 of Conti's men were caught trying to breach the perimeter. They've been detained for questioning. The euphemism wasn't lost on me. "You're going to interrogate them." It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. "Yes." I took a deep breath. "I'm coming with you." Surprise flickered across his face. "Abigail, you don't need to." "We agreed," I reminded him. "No secrets. If I'm going to be your wife, I need to understand exactly what that means. All of it, not just the parts you think I can handle." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then he nodded, something like respect mingling with concern in his gaze. "Get dressed. I'll wait for you." 15 minutes later, we descended to a sublevel of the house I hadn't known existed. A concrete corridor led to a series of rooms that reminded me unnervingly of police interrogation cells from television shows. Marco met us at the entrance, his expression carefully neutral as he nodded to me. "They're not talking yet," he reported to Dominic, "but we found this." He handed over a small device. It was in the taller one's shoe. Dominic examined it, his expression darkening. "A tracker." He turned to me. "They weren't trying to get in. They were trying to confirm our location." The implication sent a chill through me. For what purpose? "That," Dominic said grimly, "is what we're going to find out." He led me to a room with a one-way mirror looking into an interrogation cell, where 2 men sat handcuffed to metal chairs. One was older, with graying hair and the weathered look of a career criminal. The other was younger, probably no more than 25, with a defiant tilt to his chin, despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Are you sure about this?" Dominic asked quietly. "What happens in there won't be gentle." I steeled myself, thinking of Emma sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the danger that had followed us. "I'm sure." Dominic nodded to Marco, who entered the room first. Dominic followed, his entire demeanor transforming as he crossed the threshold, back straightening, expression hardening into something cold and calculating, power radiating from him like a physical force. "Gentlemen," he greeted them, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I trust Marco has made you comfortable." The older man spat on the floor. "Go to hell, Russo." Dominic smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's not a very productive start to our conversation, Mr. Vega." "Thin," he turned to the younger man. "And you must be Tony Gallo. New to Conti's organization, aren't you? First big assignment?" The younger man's eyes widened slightly, revealing Dominic's guess as accurate. "Now," Dominic continued, circling the table, "let's discuss why Alessandro sent you to my private residence, with a tracker no less." He placed the small device on the table. Was he hoping to find something, or someone? Vega maintained his stony silence, but young Tony shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I understand loyalty," Dominic continued. "It's an admirable quality, but misplaced loyalty?" He shook his head. "That's just wasteful." He leaned closer to Tony. Did Conti tell you what happened to the last men he sent to challenge me? No? He smiled again. That same chilling expression. Ask Vega. He knew them. The older man's jaw tightened, a flash of something, grief, crossing his face before he masked it. You took something that belongs to him, Vega said finally. He wants it back. Dominic's posture shifted subtly, the only indication that the words had affected him. I've taken nothing that was ever his. The woman, Vega clarified, his eyes flicking toward the mirror as if he knew I was watching. And the child. They were promised to him as payment for a debt. Ice flooded my veins as understanding dawned. Ray. This had something to do with Ray. Dominic's voice dropped dangerously low. Explain. Chen owed Conti money, a lot of money. Gambling debts, drugs, the usual story. Vega shrugged, as if discussing merchandise rather than human lives. When he couldn't pay, Conti offered him a deal. His debt would be forgiven if Conti could have the woman and child. As what? Dominic's control was slipping, anger bleeding through. Hostages? Leverage? Vega's smile was ugly. The woman's pretty. The girl's young enough to be trained. Use your imagination. What happened next was so fast I barely processed it. Dominic moved like liquid lightning, grabbing Vega by the throat, slamming him backwards with enough force to overturn the chair. Marco didn't intervene, simply shifted to block the younger prisoner's view of what was happening. You tell Alessandro, Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet as he pressed down on Vega's throat, that if he ever comes near my family again, there won't be enough left of him to identify. You tell him that Abigail Chen and her daughter are under my protection, my name, my blood. And you tell him that Ray Chen signed his own death warrant the moment he tried to sell them. He released Vega, who gasped for air, fear finally breaking through his tough exterior. Dominic straightened his cuffs, composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. Marco, see that our guests are escorted back to Conti territory. Alive, but with a clear understanding of my message. He turned to leave, then paused. And find Ray Chen. I want him brought to me, tonight. I stepped back from the mirror as Dominic exited the interrogation room, my mind reeling. Ray had tried to sell us. To settle a debt, he had offered Emma and me to a man like Alessandro Conti, knowing exactly what that would mean for us. The father of my child, the man I had once loved, had been willing to condemn us to unimaginable horror. Dominic found me leaning against the wall, fighting waves of nausea. Without a word, he gathered me into his arms, his embrace fierce and protective. I'm sorry, he murmured against my hair. You shouldn't have had to hear that. Yes, I should have. I pulled back to look at him. I needed to understand the truth, all of it. His eyes searched mine. And now that you do? Now I know I made the right choice, I said, realizing the truth of it as the words left my mouth. With you, we have a chance. Without you... The alternative was too horrifying to contemplate. A question nagged at me, one I was afraid to ask but needed to know. When you said Ray signed his death warrant, do you mean... Yes. No evasion, no softening of the truth. For what he tried to do to you and Emma, there's only one punishment. Part of me should have been horrified, should have protested or pleaded for mercy. But that part was silenced by the mother in me, the protector who would do anything to keep her child safe. Ray had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I understand, I said finally. Something in Dominic's expression shifted. Relief, perhaps, that I hadn't recoiled from this darkest aspect of his world. He took my hand, leading me back toward the upper levels of the house. Go to Emma. Stay with her. I need to make arrangements. The day passed in a strange haze of normalcy and underlying tension. I helped Emma with her lessons from the tutor Dominic had arranged, played board games with her in the sunlit living room, took her for a walk through the secure grounds of the estate. All the while, Dominic and his men moved through the house with purpose, making calls, checking security systems, preparing for something I tried not to think about too closely. As evening fell, Mrs. Ricci prepared a special dinner, Emma's favorite spaghetti and meatballs, and I focused on making the meal feel festive and normal, despite the armed guards visible through the windows, patrolling the perimeter. Mr. Dom says we're having a vacation, Emma said, as she twirled pasta onto her fork with careful concentration. But it feels more like an adventure, I smiled, reaching across the table to wipe sauce from her chin. It is an adventure, sweetheart. And soon we'll be going on an even bigger adventure. Her eyes widened. Really? Where? I glanced at Dominic, who nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. Well, Mr. Dom has asked us to come live with him, in a new house with a big yard where you can play. Emma's face lit up. Forever and ever? Forever and ever, Dominic confirmed, his eyes meeting mine over her head. If that's what you want. Will I still go to my school? Will I still see Mrs. Patel? You'll go to a new school, I explained gently, with more resources, more opportunities. But we'll visit Mrs. Patel often, I promise. Emma considered this seriously, her little brow furrowed in thought. Will you be my daddy now? She asked Dominic suddenly, with the direct simplicity only a child could manage. The question caught him off guard. For the first time since I'd known him, Dominic seemed genuinely at a loss for words. I would be honored, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. But only if you want me to be, Emma nodded decisively. I do. My old daddy was mean and made Mommy cry. You make her smile. She returned to her spaghetti, the matter settled in her mind with perfect clarity. Dominic's eyes found mine across the table, a wealth of unspoken feeling passing between us. In Emma's simple assessment lay a profound truth. Ray had brought pain and fear into our lives, while Dominic, for all the complexity and danger of his world, had brought protection and, yes, happiness. After dinner, as the sky darkened to deep indigo, Dominic received a call that made his expression tighten. He excused himself, pressing a kiss to my forehead before disappearing into his study. I put Emma to bed, reading her 3 stories before she finally drifted off, clutching the stuffed astronaut Dominic had given her. I found him on the terrace, staring out at the forest, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. They found him, he said without turning. Ray. I moved to stand beside him, our shoulders touching. When? An hour ago. Trying to leave the city. He finally looked at me. He's being held at a warehouse by the harbor. I'm going there now. I'm coming with you, I said, the decision made before I fully realized it. Dominic shook his head. Abigail, no. Not for this. Yes, for this. I turned to face him fully. He's Emma's father. He tried to sell us both to a monster. I need to look him in the eye one last time. I need to understand how he could do that to his own child. It won't bring you peace, Dominic warned. Some questions don't have satisfying answers. Maybe not, I agreed. But I still need to ask them. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Mrs. Ricci will stay with Emma. Marco will drive us. We leave in 10 minutes. The warehouse stood isolated at the edge of White Cliff Harbor, rust-streaked walls looming against the night sky. Marco drove us through a series of security checkpoints before stopping at a loading dock where several men in suits waited, guns visible beneath their jackets. They nodded respectfully to Dominic, their eyes curious but carefully neutral as they registered my presence. Inside, the cavernous space was mostly empty except for a single chair in the center, illuminated by harsh overhead lights. Ray sat bound to the chair, his face bloody and swollen, but his eyes widening in shock when he saw me enter beside Dominic. Abby, he croaked, disbelief evident in his voice. What the hell? Dominic's hand rested protectively at the small of my back as we approached. Mr. Chen, I believe you know why you're here. Ray's eyes darted between us, fear finally registering. Look, whatever Conti told you is true, Dominic interrupted, his voice calm but edged with steel. You sold your own child and her mother to settle a gambling debt. You condemned them to a fate worse than death without a second thought. It wasn't like that, Ray protested, desperation creeping into his voice. Conti was going to kill me. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Dominic replied. You made yours. Now you face the consequences. I stepped forward, needing to understand. Why, Ray? Emma is your daughter. How could you do that to her? Ray's expression shifted, a flash of the manipulative charm that had once drawn me to him breaking through his fear. Abby, baby, you know I love Emma. I was drunk. desperate. Conti threatened me. I never thought he'd actually go through with it. I was playing for time. The excuses washed over me, as empty and meaningless as all the promises he'd made over the years. I studied the man I had once believed I loved, the father of my child, and felt nothing. No anger, no hate, just a profound emptiness where emotion should be. I hope whatever time you bought was worth it, I said finally, stepping back to Dominic's side. Goodbye, Ray. Understanding dawned in Ray's eyes as I turned away, true panic setting in. Abby, wait! You can't let him do this! I'm Emma's father! Abby! I paused at the door, looking back one last time. No, you're not. Not anymore. Dominic and I walked silently back to the car, his arm around my waist, supporting me though I found I didn't need it. I had expected to feel something. Grief, guilt, horror at what I knew would happen after we left. Instead, a strange peace settled over me, as if a chapter had finally closed. Are you all right? Dominic asked, as Marco drove us away from the harbor, back toward the safe house where Emma slept, unaware of how completely her life had changed. Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. I think I am. He took my hand, the sapphire on my finger catching the glow of passing streetlights. What happens next is your decision, Abigail. We can stay in Whitecliff, or we can go somewhere new. Italy, perhaps, or anywhere you choose. Emma can have the best education, every opportunity. You can finish your degree, pursue whatever career you want. And your business? I asked. Your responsibilities here? Dominic's expression was resolute. Family comes first. Always. The business can be managed from anywhere, or passed to someone else if necessary. Sophia is more than capable. The magnitude of what he was offering, his willingness to reshape his entire world around Emma and me, took my breath away. I don't want to run, I decided. Whitecliff is our home, but I want somewhere safe for Emma, somewhere she can grow up without fear. The Heights, he suggested. The house on the cliff. It's secure, beautiful, close enough to the city for convenience but removed from the day-to-day operations. I nodded, the future taking shape in my mind. A life of privilege and protection, yes, but also of purpose. I want to finish my degree, and then... An idea that had been forming since our dinner with Emma solidified suddenly. I want to create a foundation. For women and children escaping violence. Resources, safe houses, legal support. Everything I didn't have when I was trying to leave Ray. Dominic's eyes warmed with pride, and something deeper. Done. Whatever you need to make it happen, and I want you, I added, reaching up to touch his face. Not just your protection or your resources. You. The man who builds solar systems with a 5-year-old. The man who found me in the rain and saw something worth saving. His hand covered mine against his cheek. You never needed saving, Abigail. You just needed someone to recognize your strength, to give you the chance to save yourself. As Marco drove us back through the darkened forest, I rested my head on Dominic's shoulder, contemplating the strange, unexpected path that had led me here. 2 months ago, I had been a battered, exhausted single mother with no hope of escape. Now I was engaged to one of the most powerful men in Whitecliff, planning a future that once would have seemed impossible. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, dangers, compromises. Dominic's world would always contain elements of violence and risk. But for the first time in years, I faced the future without fear. Not because someone else would protect me, but because I had found the courage to choose my own path, to build a life on my own terms. Emma would grow up loved, safe, educated. She would have opportunities I could once only dream of providing. And she would have a father who cherished her, who saw her brilliance and nurtured it, rather than trying to dim her light. As for me, I had found not just safety or security, but passion, purpose, and a love that had appeared in the most unexpected circumstances. Dominic Russo was a complex man with a dangerous life, but he was also the man who had seen me at my most vulnerable and recognized my strength rather than exploiting my weakness. When we reached the safe house, Dominic helped me from the car, pulling me into his arms beneath the star-filled sky. No regrets? He asked again, searching my face. I smiled, standing on tiptoe to press my lips to his. No regrets. His arms tightened around me, his kiss deepening with a promise of forever. Behind us, the safe house stood solid and secure, Emma sleeping peacefully inside. Before us stretched a future neither of us could have predicted but both had chosen, with eyes wide open and hearts fully engaged. The wounded single mom and the Mafia boss. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something far more real, more complex, and ultimately more meaningful. A choice made not from desperation or fear, but from strength and clarity. A recognition that sometimes protection comes from unexpected sources, and that true safety lies not in hiding from the world, but in facing it alongside someone who values you exactly as you are. As we walked hand in hand back into the house that would temporarily shelter us until our new life began, I felt the final pieces of my old self. The scared, beaten woman in the rain fall away. In her place stood someone new. Abigail Chen Russo. Protected, yes, but also protector. Loved, but also lover. Safe at last, but more importantly, finally truly free.